but I was conscious. And I found myself, my consciousness, literally up in a corner of the operating room near the ceiling. And as I was up there, I began to hear the surgeon swearing and yelling at nurses to go and get blood transfusion. And it drew my attention away from the ceiling area back behind me, just in time to see them flipping my body from being face down to being face up, and realizing that this, in fact, was my body that I was looking at from a totally different location. And as this was all happening, I was feeling a sense of calm and detachment from my body, almost as though that was not even me, although I realized it was. And the only thing that I felt uncomfortable and not, calm and detached about was I thought of my husband and my daughter and son who were in a waiting room. And I thought, if my consciousness is no longer in that body, then I must have died. And I have to get to them to let them know that I was all right, that I'm still me, I'm okay. So as I thought that, my consciousness literally drifted through the wall of this operating room and out into the hallway I had come down, past all of these other operating rooms, and through the entryway into the operating suite, out into another hallway. And as my consciousness was moving, I began to hear a telepathic voice saying, "Pay attention to this man." And it drew my attention to my left, where I could see a man in regular street clothes, and he was rushing fast back toward the way that I had just come. And as I was told to pay attention to him, I also was able to zoom in really close and see exactly what he was wearing, the colors of clothing he was wearing, the color of his eyes, his hair color. And I'm a very nearsighted person. So for me to be able to see that closely was just amazing to me. And at the same time, I began to hear his thoughts. And he was thinking that he needed to get into that operating suite quickly. And he kept rushing past and in that direction. So I turned my attention toward him in time to see another man, just in regular clothes, who was down near that area, and hear his thoughts as he was thinking, that guy can't go in there. He's just a regular guy, and he can't go in where they're doing operations. And so I heard both of these thoughts, and then the man I was supposed to pay attention to begin with paused for a moment, and then double doors opened up and he rushed inside and then closed behind him. And so my thoughts returned to finding the waiting room and finding my husband and my daughter and son. But before I could keep going in the direction that I was headed, I began to be pulled and no longer directing my own movement. And I was literally pulled up through the ceiling of the floor I was on, and up through the next floor, and up through all the way out through the roof of the hospital, way up into the sky above the hospital. And then I began being pulled rapidly horizontally in the direction of the city of Anchorage, which was near where this hospital was located. And as I got over the city, which sits on a bay, as I got to where I would be going over the water, a big dark opening that looked like either a cave or a tunnel, something dark and rounded, opened up, and I was pulled inside it. And as I was pulled inside it, I began moving extremely fast. And it was very dark, but very far in the distance, I could see a pinprick of light. And as I was pulled faster and faster, the light seemed to be getting larger and larger as I was getting closer to it. And then, in what seemed like no time at all, suddenly I completely burst into this entire light that was enveloping the end of this tunnel area that I had gone through. And when I burst into this light, I felt immediately filled with just tremendous love and peace and joy and just amazing emotions that like you could never imagine. And the light was everywhere, and I began to think, well, where am I? And so I turned my attention downward to see what was this place that I had arrived in. And I realized I didn't have any feet. Where I looked, and there should be feet, there were none, but there was a very brown and rocky sort of a ground, very desert-like, arid type place. And that puzzled me because I thought, well, I've died. I must be in heaven, and somehow this doesn't look like anything I would think that heaven would look like. And so I was puzzled by that. And then again, a telepathic voice spoke to me from off to my left. And the voice that spoke this time said, "Follow me." And as I turned in that direction, there was a man who was climbing up a slope out of this area that I had come out into. And as soon as he had said that to me, I was right behind him and looking carefully at who this person was, or at least what I could see of him. And I saw that he had almost black hair, that he had it pulled back and then tied with what looked like a piece of leather. And what he was wearing was like a toga type of a garment that was off-white, and it ended about midway down his thigh above the knee. And again, a tie was around his waist. And on his feet, he had sandals, and the sandals weren't just, on his feet. They had ties that crisscrossed and tied below his knees. And I felt as though I should know who this person was and that he cared a lot about me. And as we got up over the top of the slope, the place turned into a completely different type of not the arid and dry area, but a very lush and green, beautiful place. And the grass and all sorts of different flowers that were scattered through the grass. Everything was as though it was lit from inside and was alive and was giving off light. And it was fascinating to see. And I looked ahead and I saw trees, gorgeous trees, and they were glowing and giving off light, and the leaves were also. And I was mesmerized by this and how the beauty of it all. And the man who had asked me to follow him had gone ahead, and he spoke again and said, "Follow me again." And as he did, I was right behind him as he was on the bank of a river. And the river itself was just alive and glowing and glistening like diamonds and so gorgeous. And on the opposite bank of this river, there were a whole group of people, spiritual people, I guess you could say, but I instantly knew that the first one that drew my attention was my father, who had died when I was 7. And also with him was my brother, who had died in a car accident. And then I realized that the other people that were there were my relatives who had all passed away at different times in my lifetime. And there were aunts and uncles, and there were 4 people that I had never seen or recognized, but somehow I just knew that they were my 4 grandparents who had all died before I was born. And all of them were just so happy and so pleased to see me and just saying, oh, look, she's here. Isn't it wonderful? And I was feeling the same way, as though I just wanted to be across that water and where they were so badly, had missed them so much. And the man who I was following, I came to think of as my guide, and he telepathically said, no, you can't go there now. You have to follow me. And we have somewhere else you must go first. And so, since I wasn't able to direct where my consciousness was moving and was being drawn every place, I was drawn behind him as he went down and around a curve in the river and into a huge opening, in the center of which was this enormous building that looked like what you might think of either Greek or Roman, huge, with white columns and lots of stairs up to it and glowing white. It was, I call it pearlescent white, because it was that type of a glossy, but giving off light like everything that I had seen while I was there. And my guide had gone all the way up these long stairs to the opening. And he said again, follow me. And as he did, we went inside, and this enormous building was inside like a huge library with tables all down through the center part of it, and each side filled with books. And some of the books were not, they were scrolls, they weren't actually books, but there was floor upon floor upon floor, as high up as I could see. There didn't even seem to be a ceiling. It just went on, seemed like endlessly, all these floors on either side filled with books. And my guide said, this is the place where the books of life are stored, but we're not staying here. We have another place to go to. So we continued all the way through this entire area and into a small hallway, and then into a doorway that went into a much smaller room. And in this much smaller room, there was already a group of spiritual beings that were around a huge oval area, if you think of like maybe a conference table in an oval shape. And they were there as though waiting for us to come in. And again, I felt as though I should know who these people are. I should know they care a lot about me, and I should recognize them, but I didn't. But I did get a feeling as though somehow that they had helped me plan my life before I began living it. And my guide then said, we're going to review your life. And as he said that, it was as though a hologram appeared in the center of this big oval that they were all sitting around. And as it came up into view, I got to view my whole life from the time I was born until then. And it wasn't just a matter of watching it like you'd watch a movie. I was actually living it, all of the interactions with all the people all throughout my life. And in addition to feeling everything that I felt at that time that the interaction took place, I was also feeling as though I was the other person at the same time. So if I had been angry and I had said mean things to someone, then I would be feeling how hurt they felt, as well as feeling my own anger at the time. Or the other way around, if I had done something very kind and thoughtful and really didn't give it as much of a second thought, I was feeling how much that other person was appreciating that kindness. And in all these different scenes, I was also able to see the ripple effect of how that carried through that person to the other people they interacted with, and then to the ones that they interacted with, just going out like this enormous effect of just small interactions. And it was just the most amazing thing. And where I would feel really badly about, oh, why did I behave like that? Or I could have done better than that. The people, the spiritual people who were there with me gave me nothing but support and comfort and feedback of, you were learning. This is for you to learn even more about how important it is for everybody when they're interacting with other people. So at that point, I don't remember a return trip to my body. I only remember being in my body and waking up in a recovery room.